Please take your seats quickly, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Tennis Weekly with Joel, Kim and Chris. On today's Tour Catch-Up, sponsored by DownloadTennis.com.
Coco Gauff wins the biggest title of her career.
Dan Evans' dream run in DC.
And Dominic Thiem makes his first ATP final since 2020.
Chris, today is the 7th of August and we are here to catch up on the week in tennis at Tennis Weekly HQ. Washington, DC is over, the first ever ATP and WTA combined 500 event. Coco Gauff and Britain's own Dan Evans are your champions. Stefanos Tsitsipas took the title in Los Cabos, and Dominic Thiem had a very nearly dream run in his home tournament in Kitzbuhel, making an ATP final, and we had a Monday finish in Prague. There is loads and loads to talk about, Rogers Cup included, and what I love at the moment, Chris, is that it genuinely is 24-hour tennis.
It's very hard to be able to manage it, I have to say. I mean, for me, I'm used to live streaming events whilst at tournaments, if there's a WTA event on anywhere. But I mean, it's tennis round the clock. I think that was even a notification I got on my phone, which was 24 hours of tennis on tennis TV or Tennis Channel. And I just thought, goodness, I mean, people need to think about their sleep balance and how this affects their working lives, because right now it's pretty addictive.
Well, I thought it was going to genuinely be 24-hour tennis for Linda Noskova because, as I say, she played in the Prague final today. She was scheduled to be in the main draw in the Rogers Cup in Montreal. So I was thinking, well, yeah, how do you get the quickest flight all the way through to Canada from the Czech Republic? But she has drawn out. So she's obviously not a fan of living and breathing 24-hour tennis.
Maybe she checked the weather forecast, because as you say, it's not looking good in Montreal at all.
No. And
the weather wasn't good where she was in Prague. So maybe just cut your losses and fly somewhere a bit sunnier if you're Linda.
I would have looked at the forecast and thought, hang on, this has bought me some time here. I'm going to make that flight and hope the organisers are nice to me.
Yeah, you could play your next first round in a week from today. Who knows?
Well, I mean, we've got so much to talk about. We're going to be talking about Rogers Cup in the second half because I'm really excited because Caroline Wozniacki is back. I don't know how that is going to go, but
in Denmark, I mean, people are waving flags in the street.
Well, yes, of course.
I might have people around to celebrate.
I mean, we can talk about the reaction in Denmark because I would love to hear that. But we're going to be talking about all the events from this week in the first half. We weren't short on action, but before we get into that, what has been your highlight of the week so far?
Well, on the subject of comebacks, Joel, mine is a certain Anna Shakvatadze, who actually does come up more often than you think on the podcast for someone who hadn't played a match since 2012, because Kim does like to go out whilst saying Anna Shakvatadze on a par for the courts.
Great player.
And she was actually appearing for the first time in 10 years on an entry list for an ITF 15K out in Belgium. And there's a couple of other events out there that she's on the list for. So was very excited by this news, really was looking forward to it, was checking my live scores app. And I find out that, as excited as I am, she isn't actually getting to play this week. The tournament organisers decided that they were going to give the wild card to local talent instead, giving it to...
Big call.
I mean, it was 5 local talents that the board gave it to. And they seemed to kind of say that it just felt like she was sort of just picking up a racket so she could play a bit of tennis. And they wanted to focus on people who might have a career starting in tennis. So a little bit of a debate there, but initially very excited to see her on the entry list, but it is poles apart from Wozniacki.
I would have thought, tournament organiser, if I'm in their shoes, I could have got the inside scoop here. You know, this news broke. I felt like it was all of a sudden. I was very surprised and shocked because you normally hear there's sort of be some sort of long lead up and then it happens. But this came out of nowhere, and I would have thought maybe the tournament organizer would like to have capitalized on this for what, let's be honest, a pretty kind of low profile event.
I mean, personally, I'd have given her the wild card without question.
Former world number 5. Who wouldn't want that in your draw?
Former semi-finalist. I mean, she reached 2 quarterfinals, 1 semi-final in 2007. she had some fantastic results, and yeah, she can really play tennis. And I imagine that, no offense to kind of Twilth, Gerolma, or kind of Vicky van der Peers, who are both kind of outside the world's top 700, but maybe if she hasn't picked up a racket since she retired, she still would have a good chance. So seems like a missed opportunity, but fingers crossed we can give you an update next week and she's back out there on the tour.
I feel like we're never short of ITF events for players to play in, so I'm sure there is going to be some draw. Or
wildcards for returning players, because I mean, normally everyone gets one.
I would love to see that. I mean, it'd be fascinating. As you said, we've had Caroline Wozniacki back, Kim Clijsters. That generation, maybe Serena Williams included, they do not know the meaning of the word retirement, do they?
Well, I mean, I think they don't know the meaning of it, but also I think they're addicted to it. They love it. So I think maybe with this, it's more not an addiction for Shakhtar. I feel like maybe she's just dipping her toe back in, whereas I feel like with the Wozniacki, I mean, it's full scale. She looks like she's ready for anything.
She wants to take on the new people and prove a point, I feel.
I think so. But where was your attention this week? What was your highlight, Joel?
Well, mine also was on the women's tour, and it was on Iga Swiatek, actually, because she was photographed in Montreal training. She's the top seed there, but she was papped on the practice courts with tape over her mouth. And this was very bizarre. I'd never seen this before. I was a bit confused. What's going on here? Because my instinct reaction was maybe if you're like grunting and you wanted to sort of suppress that noise, maybe this was a technique to do that. But apparently it's to do with nasal breathing, and which has benefits. It helps you recover faster, and there's science out there that suggests that maybe it can even increase your performance. But that is a completely new one on me, but a really fascinating insight, I feel, into kind of the lengths top level athletes go to try and get one up on their competition.
I didn't know that it helped with your kind of endurance and your heart rate, but I guess it kind of makes sense. It's a bit like when you do yoga, you're supposed to breathe through your nose because then your heart rate doesn't increase so much. So it sounds like she's trying to do some on-court meditation, but sometimes it doesn't look like her heart rate has to get up much at all to come through a tennis match. So maybe she is just on autopilot, Joel.
I do love. I mean, it feels like she's open to new ideas and experimenting. And when you're at number one, and everyone is gunning for your ranking and all your trophies, I feel like you've always got to maybe break the mold a little bit. And I quite like this, but it's very innovative and very kind of, as I say, kind of caused eyebrows, I think, to be raised across the tennis community. So
she's been doing it for a while, though. She did say this is not a new thing. This is the first time people have spotted it. So I think for her, maybe that's the reason for her success rather than kind of the reason.
It was the tape. I'm waiting for it. Final Rogers Cup, Montreal in a week's time. It was the gaffer tape that won it. I can see it now.
I think it's masking tape.
Right, let's talk Washington DC now, because this was a combined event, ATP and WTA 500 level. First time this has ever happened. We're going to start with the men's event, and Dan Evans, who is now the world number 21, defeated Talon Griekspoor straight set 7-5, 6-3. There was a little bit of a rain stoppage, but they got it done in the end. Chris, this was a final no one was expecting. Dan Evans has been on an awful losing streak over the last few months. He's lost 8 out of his last 9 matches. His 2023 record is 1-11, lost 18. And all of a sudden, he does this and wins his first ever ATP 500 final. Where did this come from?
All I can say is when you step on court with Andy Murray, magic can happen. Inspired by that doubles first round win.
Yeah.
Having fun on court again, maybe. That's where I think a lot of players that kind of get that success, I do think it does come from being able to relax and kind of play your best game, whether it is on the doubles court like Garcia or Kyrgios has found. I do think there's got to be something in that, because last week in Atlanta, that lost to, I think it was it Dominic Koffner in where it was almost heartbreaking loss, and you just think, I did not think he'd be picking himself up like this. So I think it's an unbelievable achievement, because if anything, I thought that would really be, and a lot of people were asking, like, is it time to take some time away? And I think he proved that all of us wrong. And for me, what was most impressive about this was that it was almost like all of that scar tissue from potentially not having a great season was just wiped away. I mean, some of the numbers that he was pulling that week, in the final, he won 98% of first serve points and he made 74% of first serves. He wasn't broken.
Incredible.
It was lights out tennis all week. And I think that he played so well, I'll even forgive him for his trainer socks, Joel.
You have a real issue with the trainer socks. I call them ankle socks.
Ankle socks, yes.
That he wears on court, because it is quite distinctive. It's hard not to notice. Maybe that is his magic power.
That's his tape.
But I mean, yeah, he had some great wins throughout the week. You know, for me, the highlights were his quarterfinal and semi-final. He defeated Francis Tiafoe in straight sets, 6-4, 7-5, and then he defeated Grigor Dimitrov, who I think has been playing more consistently better tennis than him across the season. Again, defeated him in straight sets to make the final. And Talon Grigor's had a great, has had a great season. He had that, he won that ATP title at home in Sir Hertogenbosch. So he took out Taylor Fritz as well in the semis. So he's taken out some very handy players. And, at 33 years old, he is on the cusp of getting back, cracking really the top 20. Did you think he had this level of tennis in him? I know we talk about the fact that, he's hadn't been on a terrible run of form recently, and now he's just seemingly kind of pulled it out the bag. Have you seen a level of tennis, do you think, this week that has been above what you've ever seen of a Dan Evans?
Well, I mean, I think he played some of the best tennis I've ever seen him play. I think there's never been a point in time where anyone's sort of doubted his talent, even when he has kind of had some of the trials and tribulations of his career. Obviously there was that 1 year ban he had as well, and people always said, like, how high can he go? It was definitely a case that people thought he definitely had top 20 tennis in him. And so I think he's completely corrected that story in terms of people ever thinking he didn't achieve his potential, because I think when you see him play like this and on the cusp of the top 20, you have to think that he has top 20 tennis in him, and at times he can challenge some of the best of the game. He's beaten Novak Djokovic on clay, one of the few losses that Novak Djokovic has had in recent seasons. So his caliber is kind of undeniable, but I do think it's always the mental side with him. I mean, he's talked about, like, a while ago, I think he said his psychologist described as one of the angriest people he'd ever met because of the way that he thinks, and some of his...
No, he's just from Birmingham. He's just from the Midlands. That's just how they act.
Maybe it was a translation thing. Maybe it's like a Californian psychologist. But I do think it's the temperament side of things. So for me, the biggest shock from this is that he took what was probably one of the most kind of soul-destroying losses of his career and turned it into something so positive, having had sort of a difficult track record sometimes with keeping everything straight between the ears. So unbelievably impressive. But I have to say, when we were WhatsApping this week, Joel, I don't think any of us thought this would be the end result of the tournament. It's quite something.
No, and I do agree. I think what I've really liked when I've watched him on court this week is the positive outlook that he's had, because he's had moments where he's been in real trouble facing break points and on the cusp of going a breakdown or maybe even losing a set. But he always seems to bounce back, and I think in the losses I've seen of him recently, I think he's got down on himself too much, and he's been overwhelmed, I feel, by that negative energy, and as a result, the matches have just got away from him. But I've really been impressed with how he's kind of openly kind of communicating with his box. He's being more positive. He's looking to be more assertive. And I think, he's a very tricky player, I think, on his day. I love his slice backhand still stays so low.
So effective.
And it's so effective,
out
isn't
there.
it? Exactly. But he also, I think, closes the net very, very well. And I think that's a very underrated and underappreciated part of his game. Although I think he can, look to attack players, I think his defensive qualities this week really kind of shone for me. And, some of the best points I've seen from him has been kind of passing shots and players trying to hit winners against him whilst he's at the net. And he's just basically been like, you shall not pass. And he's had such great coverage. So
his fitness, Joel, we must speak on that, because you say 33, I think 33 must be the new 23, because it seems like he's kind of taken something that Novak Djokovic has taken, because physically in fantastic shape, because the conditions they looked really quite challenging the whole week. I mean, as a spectator, I think you almost needed some sort of... I think Coco was encouraging people to have water because of how hot it was.
There was so many, it felt like... Well, not loads, but like there was definitely more than one like medical emergency in the crowd, which you never want to see. But I don't know if it's me, but I always feel like you see and hear more of those instances when we do get to the North American hardcourt swing.
I mean, there was a couple when I was at Wimbledon this year, and I think that's probably because someone drank too much. So maybe it's because it is genuinely heat related over there as opposed to in the UK. But no, a fantastic achievement, and something that I was going to ask you about. So we'll be dropping off a few points when it comes to results that he got last year at the Rogers Cup, and so I think he'll be maybe down to somewhere around 30. But do you think that he will be able to kind of end the season in top 20 and have that top 20 kind of season-ending ranking?
I personally don't see why not. I don't think there's much difference between like top 20 and top 30 at the moment. So I think with the confidence that he will have take from Washington, and the fact that this is at the start of the very start of the North American hardcourt swing, with Cincinnati to come, Rogers Cup to come, US Open to come, where there's going to be potentially more points available beyond a 500. I don't see why not. And I think the other question to ask is, dare I say, Cam Norrie lost in the first round of, he lost his first match in Los Cabos. He's also a little bit on a downward trajectory at the moment since Wimbledon. There might be even a little bit of an overlap potentially to a new British number one in Dan Evans.
Well, there's a lot of British competition. I think that's something that's definitely true for the LTA. They definitely support each other, but they do like to beat each other. So it'll be interesting to see how that one sort of pans out. I think I've seen this before from Dan Evans when he has got that big result, that it is so hard to back it up. So I will forgive him if there's an early exit in Toronto this week, but I do think come Cincinnati and come the US Open, that's a tough third round draw for someone if he's not ranked in the top 16 by that point.
I agree. I also think Talon Griekspoor is going to be a player no one is going to be wanting to face at the US Open, because he has a very similar game, I feel, to Dan Evans. And again, he had a very good week coming through Taylor Fritz, particularly in that semi-final. So I think he's going to be another player just no one is going to want to face. Moving on to the women's side of the draw in Washington, we had Coco Gauff defeat Maria Sakkari in the final 6-2, 6-3. This was her first ever title on home soil. It was the biggest title of her career. Chris, what did you make of this? Because there's been so much criticism, I feel, of Coco Gauff this season, particularly of her forehand and her serving and everything in between. Was this week the best sort of retort and riposte to all of those critics?
I honestly think that it wouldn't really kind of cross her mind in that way. I think she's just playing her game and improving her game, and this is kind of a testament to that. She's so inspired playing in front of a US crowd, and she just got up to a great start, and she never looked back. And I've been looking at quite a lot of her training when there's been kind of some videos from it, and it's very clear to me that she's really working on that forehand. And although it can still be a bit cagey at times, it just shows you just how good the rest of her game is. She's an incredible mover. When the serve is on, it's so effective. And I just think that, I did pick Coco to win Wimbledon. I did think she was playing some fantastic tennis coming into Wimbledon and just got a very tough draw against inspired Sophia Kenin. And it's great to see her get a result like this.
Was she disappointed she let you down? Is that what you're saying in your predictions? So she's trying to make up for it in Washington.
She could never disappoint me. No way. I think, especially when she's 19, and we're still talking about this as though, I've seen it in some of the headlines. She finally wins a 500, or she finally does this, and you're like, she's 19, and she's already such a regular presence in the top 10 and at the end, the business end of tournaments. So super happy for her in this one, and I think let's just hope she can bring this form forward, because it feels like her season has got this trajectory that's really starting to build some momentum. And the way that she dismantled Maria Sakkari in that final, she was a woman on a mission. And I think there was no sort of doubts about what she was trying to do and execute on the day. And sometimes we've seen a bit of hesitation there from her. So for me, it was just kind of Coco 2.0 in terms of how she was playing and the game that she was executing. No sets dropped. She beat 3, I think, top 20 players, and she's had a pretty bad record against top 10 players so far. I think someone said she lost the last 7. So all of it's coming together, and let's hope that her hard court swing continues to build momentum.
Yeah, and it's interesting because she has changed up her coaching setup recently. She's brought on Spanish player Per Riba, who I think was working with Qingwen Zheng, into her setup. And she's also brought back Brad Gilbert on as well, who's a big-time American player, great coach, was with Andy Murray in his formative years, coached Andre Agassi, Andy Roddick. So it also seems to be like that change-up is being quite fruitful quite early on. And although I think it's still in like a trial period, I think they've kind of extended with Brad Gilbert into the Rogers Cup. It seems to be that it's working really, really well for Coco Gauff. What do you think in terms of her game? What do you think are the tools in her toolbox that you have seen improved over, in Washington that has got her to this point where she has won the biggest title of her career?
I think we all know she's got the game. So for me, it's a mentality. And so I think Brad Gilbert is such a fantastic addition to her team because he did literally write the book on winning ugly.
Yeah, great book.
So when your forehand's not working, when you're hitting the double faults, it's about finding a way to win. It's not always about playing your best level of tennis. It's about beating the player in front of you and not beating yourself. And that's almost exactly what Coco needs at times. And so I think it's a great matchup. And it seems like this new coaching setup is something that's really kind of given her that extra oomph, a little bit of a different way of thinking about things maybe, because it's come so soon after this sort of transition, and she's been working with Patrick Mouratoglou as well at times, and it feels like maybe the sum of all of these sort of different influences have really helped her kind of get the results this week. And it does make you think that maybe, and we do talk about this a lot, that Maria Sakkari could also do with a bit of a coaching shake-up. And I don't know what you think about that, Joel.
Yeah, it's a tough one because she's had that awful record in semi-finals, and she got to another semi-final here, and actually she won it. She beat Jessie Pegula in the top seed in 3 sets, and I was like, oh my god, Maria Sakkari's back. And when we had that matchup between Sakkari and Gauff going into it, to be honest, I was actually a bit like, I'd like both of them to win because Sakkari has also got her critics, I think, like Coco Gauff, particularly when it comes to the business end of tournaments and her record. And you do have to look at her record in finals, and it's just no good. She's lost 7 finals out of 8, 6 in a row now. When I was watching this match, I was just kind of thinking, is it just mental for Sakkari in this moment that it's just sort of overwhelming her, and as a result, she's not able to play her best tennis? Or was it more actually Coco Gauff on her day is just a better tennis player than Maria Sakkari, and Sakkari needs to go back to the practice court and fine-tune her technique in order to compete with these top-level players that she's going to meet in the final? Where do you think it stands? Do you think it's mental? Do you think it's actually technical? Or do you think it's maybe even a little bit of both?
I think that there are more technical potential shortcomings in Coco's game, and I'm saying that with an asterisk because she's a fantastic player. She's a top 10 player. It's just because there's so much expectation there that we do put this microscope over Coco when it comes to these things. With Sakkari, we do all know it's a mental thing. The record speaks for itself, and we all know how well she can play. Yeah. So there were tears in that presentation, weren't there, afterwards? I think she's all too aware of all these statistics that commentators like to draw upon when she does get to this stage, and it just can't be good for her, can it? It can't, but we're also guilty of doing the same. And I think I listened to a very interesting interview with her where she kind of said, well, a lot of people would love to have reached 17 semi-finals or whatever number it is, or 8 finals. And it's so true in that respect. But I think the reason why there is that negative connotation to it is because we all know how good she can play, how well she can play. And so I think that's the only frustration there. And I think when someone keeps their coaching setup and everything the same and it doesn't take them to the next level, I think that's when you have to think about if that's the right decision, because I think for most people it's glaringly obvious that introducing some differences in the coaching setup, you could keep Tom at the same time, but it's obviously not getting you a Grand Slam. And it depends on, are you here to win tennis matches or are you here to win big tournaments? And I think that's a question that I would be asking Maria Sakkari at this point of her career.
Well, there was Greek success this week in Los Cabos because Stefanos Tsitsipas won the 250 out there. He defeated Alex de Minaur in the final 6-3, 6-4. I'm not really sure there's too much to say about this, Chris, apart from the thing that surprised me most. This was Stefanos Tsitsipas's first ATP title on outdoor hard courts, which took me by surprise. And then, I looked at his record at the US Open. It isn't actually that great. He's reached the third round. He's reached the third round twice. Why do you think Tsitsipas on outdoor hard, arguably up to this moment, hasn't really lived up to what he's been producing on the other court surfaces?
Yeah, I think his game, he obviously has played a lot on clay growing up, and I think it's clear that that's a very comfortable surface for him. I also think that the nature of indoor tennis works well for him because he is prone to a few shanks on outdoor courts, you have to say, because of the nature of his game. So he does have some timing issues. So I would probably say it's something to do with that as to why he hasn't had more success on outdoor courts. But having said that, at the at the Australian Open, he's had plenty of success. He's had semi-finals there in the past. I do think there's probably something that sort of connects with the fact that I think Ash Barty's former coach said that the nature of the US Open and the type of ball they actually play with there, I believe it's a US Open Wilson ball, but I think that might not be the same as the men. But I do think there's something about the conditions where if you do mix up your shots and the variety, it definitely is not the slam that favours you the most. We've seen that from the types of winners that we've had there. It's hard to break through unless you are one of those sort of big hitters in some of those places. So for me, that's probably what it's connected to. But also, I don't think he does necessarily prioritise this part of the season. He would normally be in Hamburg on the clay. So when he is playing the big Masters tournaments, not everyone gets one of those outdoor wins. So for me, it's not as surprising as it sounds. But again, I did have to double check that.
And we've also got Mark Philippoussis back on the scene because he was effectively ditched by Tsitsipas, a few months ago. It was apparently it was a mutual decision. But all of a sudden, Philippoussis has been back. He was in the player box in Los Cabos for Tsitsipas. What do you make of this? Do you think this is a smart move, or why do you think there's been a change of heart from Tsitsipas and what feels like quite a quick change of heart as well?
It is a big turnaround. I do think it was probably a bit of a knee-jerk reaction to what might be an internal conflict within the family, would be my suggestion. I'm not privy to internal workings of families, so this is only speculation. But I do think it's probably quite likely that it came from some of the on-court, you can see there's on-court aggro there every match, and it's never easy. And so,
well, I feel like the elephant in the room is that Tsitsipas plays better tennis when Apostolos, his dad, is not in the player box, and you can put the Los Cabos title as proof of that.
Completely. And I think he said that his father will only be at the slams now, is kind of what's been said. And I think that this will be beneficial. I think when Philippoussis, it was announced that he was splitting, we all thought this was not a positive step, given some of the scenes we've seen on court between him and his family. So, smart move. I think it was not necessarily a smart move to rehire him. I think it's a smart move to keep him in your camp. But nevertheless, I think obviously it's another example of get the coaching situation right and the results come. So it'll be interesting to see what the two of them can do when he finally makes it to the US, to Canada, North America. Because I feel like he's been all over the place, but it'd be good to see him play against some top players and see where his level really is at.
Yeah, it'll be fascinating to see. As I say, the Tsitsipas coaching dynamic is always like a bit of a theatre and a bit of a sideshow. And just with Philippoussis this week, it feels like maybe he's just been able to focus and concentrate on his tennis, and as a result, it's got the best out of him, and he went on to win the title. Another player who won a title this week was Sebastian Baez in Kitzbuhel. He defeated Dominic Thiem in a pretty straightforward final, it has to be said, 6-3, 6-1. But Chris, what do you make of this? Can I say like Dominic Thiem is back? I feel like I've said that like a million times. Or do you think this is just like, it had to happen here in the sense like this is the last clay court event of the season. Most players are already thinking about the hard courts, or even in North America already. If there was one draw that was going to really play to your advantages being at home and on clay, it was this one.
Yes, I think that's a very important point to make because the tournaments out in Austria and in Prague for 250 tournaments is probably about as weak as the field has ever been. I think everyone has made the shift over. I think the scheduling's a bit different this year.
Should these events even exist?
I think it's a week too long. I think it is. I think this is definitely even the players who are playing back-to-back on clay. I think some of them are getting injured at this stage. And then obviously it affects you being able to go and play on the hard court. So for me, and it's the same players, but gradually more and more of them transfer to the hard court. So it just gets weaker and weaker in the field. So in terms of Thiem's performance, I mean, we have to also say he was a wild card at this tournament. This is where his ranking is at now. Is this a great performance from a wild card at a home tournament? Yes, this is a great story for a Dominic Thiem. Can I get excited? The way he was dismantled in that final, obviously he played an absolute marathon semi-final, but I really can't because this isn't the Thiem of old. This is a nice celebration of a good result for a player who's really struggling to find form. But when everyone kind of got on the hype train of he's made a final, it's the final of the lowest level.
You are so
ATP.
harsh. So harsh.
I don't think it's harsh because I think anyone who watched the matches will know that every match with Thiem, you have moments where you think he's back, moments where he's not, and now we're 3 years past that US Open triumph. So I think for me personally, I would rather see him play great tennis consistently than kind of pretend that one tournament and he's back to where he is. So I hope it's a building block. We've said it before. I'm taking nothing away from the final, but at the same time, I think all of this hype doesn't help him get back to playing. He's at home comforts. Let's see what happens next week.
The final tournament we had this week was the Prague Open. Chris, this is literally just finished. The rain has been shocking. Hibino, the lucky loser, came out on top from Japan. She beat Linda Noskova 6-4, 6-1.
One of Kim's favourites.
Yeah, they literally had to start this match at like 10:30 a.m. I think this morning. Hibino's semi-final didn't get played until Sunday. It then finished like after 5 minutes this morning, and then they played the final straight after. I mean, this was just like an organiser's nightmare, I think, from start to finish. But yeah, it's interesting. I think Noskova was meant to play in Canada, but she withdrew and then obviously got defeated by Hibino. So didn't necessarily, I feel like, pay off. But where would you stand if you're in that position? Like home tournament, got the chance for a home title, but I know bigger points potentially and bigger prize money is lurking a long distance flight away. Would you have withdrawn?
She withdrew after the final, I believe. I think it came about 3 hours ago, the withdrawal. So I think you have to balance your body, and winning the title was obviously where all of her attention was. And getting to a tournament late and not having a hit on the courts, not getting used to the conditions, it's not a good setup. And jet lag is obviously real for many players, and they have to deal with it on a week in, week out basis sometimes. So I do think that for me, it made sense. But I do just think that, I mean, Hibino, she's one of those players that you watch her and she can really make it happen. She's got such solid ground strokes, and her third title, she's won titles before in Japan, in Tashkent, and she's also another lucky loser to win an event. And I saw that this is now the fifth lucky loser to win a WTA event. It's happened this year already with Thiem and Evans, who won in Budapest. And before that, it was Coco, Gauff and Linz in 2019. So that also just shows you, Coco Gauff picking up a 500 at 19. Yeah. And
I think she won the doubles in that event as well with Katie McNally, I think. I could be wrong there.
She might have, but we're having more of these lucky losers who are coming through because, I mean, it's 2 in one season for the first time ever. So is that a case that some of these draws are getting a little bit weaker, Joel? Is that what it's saying?
Yeah, it's tough. If there is a point in the season where you do think that maybe the quality level dips and the talent is spread too thinly, I think it is in this crossover phase between like hard courts and clay courts across Europe and America. So yeah, I agree. It's we'll have to see. I think more can be done, to be honest, at this point in the tour to make the tournaments of a higher quality. So yeah, we're going to take a quick break now, but join us in the second half where we will be discussing all things Rogers Cup, including the return of Caroline Wozniacki to the tour, plus the news that the US Open are going to be using video review at this year's event. So do not go anywhere. Welcome back to the Tennis Weekly podcast, sponsored by DownloadTennis.com. And now we are going to move on to Par for the Courts, Chris. It's a solo edition. Kim is not here today, so it is a solo edition.
I always prefer
ready?
it when Kim's here. I do think it's a team effort. And the team is Kim and I against you, because I think at some point, John, you're going to have to step up and do a Par for the Courts for yourself.
I know. It doesn't happen that often. I just love doing them. There's so much. I love being the quiz master.
Yeah, you are good at it.
Yes, I do have one for you. It's in the same vein as last week, because I talked to you about Serena Williams and players who she has faced in a Grand Slam final. So I only thought it was fair to do a male equivalent. So my question for you and our listeners is opponents of Roger Federer in Grand Slam singles finals. There are 14 individuals in total. And
right.
Because this is a solo edition, I am going to set the par score. And historically, I've been way too nice in terms of setting that par score. And I'm going to be really ballsy this time and go with... I want 12 out of 14.
Are you joking? Joel? Okay.
No more
12.
Mr. Nice Guy.
Right.
How are you going to kick us off?
Well, I'm going to start with his first title.
Oh, okay. Not going with the more obvious names. Okay.
Well, it's quite obvious if you listen to this episode. Mark Philippoussis springs to mind.
Correct. Yes, Mark Philippoussis. That was at Wimbledon.
I'm not sure if I'm in order, so I'm just gonna say things because I've got to get to 12. So Andy Roddick, I know they've played many a final.
Correct.
I know that Leighton Hewitt, they played an early final, and I think Federer won that one as well.
Correct. Yes, Leighton Hewitt's on the list.
And now I'm just going to get the easy ones out the way. Let's go for a Nadal, a Djokovic, and a Murray.
Very good. Yes. So that is 6. So you're halfway there.
I feel like that should be further than half, but Marin Cilic, they played twice in finals, I believe.
Very good. Yes, Marin Cilic is on the list.
Because that 2018 Australian Open, oh god, that was what a win that was. I was watching that whilst walking around Berlin, Joel. He lost the final to Juan Martín del Potro.
Very good. Yes, I remember staying up very late when I was at university, watching that match.
Who were you rooting for?
I think I was in that sort of I'm so sick of Roger Federer winning phase.
I could never be sick of it.
No, I've gone out of that phase now. But yeah, I think I was rooting for Del Potro. But yeah, Del Potro is on the list. So that's 8 so far.
Every Nadal stand's favourite player, Robin Soderling.
Very good. Robin Soderling is on the list. That is 9.
I really think this is a hard one, Joel, I have to say. I've actually only got one more right now that I'm sure of. I do know that this is when I first got into tennis, Andre Agassi, he beat in the US Open when Agassi was having a sort of a top 10 resurgence. Andre
Agassi is a correct answer. Very good. So you have made double digits. And this is where it gets interesting because you need 2 more to get par for the courts.
This really is not very easy. I'm going to say Marat Safin. I think they played in Australia.
Correct. Yes, that is a correct answer.
Oh, I've got one more then.
One more to get. And
okay.
Actually, I'm going to tell my listeners now, I've actually got Nadal's name down here on here twice. So there's actually 13 in total. Okay,
so could I have 11 as par?
Okay,
I'll try. I'll try.
Yeah, okay. I'm going to give you it then. That's 11. So yes.
So I've got two to get.
There are two left, yes.
The only person that I can think of, I don't remember if he picked up a Wimbledon against Thomas Berdych. That's the only one I can think of that I don't even know if that's right, but that's what I'm going with.
Thomas Berdych is an incorrect answer, Chris. No, it is not on the list. But I'm going to give you par for the courts anyway because I did screw that up at the end because I did have Nadal on the list twice.
Well, I mean, I'll take that.
So you were very, very close. Any other names that were floating about?
I was thinking Marcos Baghdatis is one that I was thinking because I know he made the final I think it was in Australia, and I don't think that was Djokovic or Nadal. So that was the only other name I had as potential, but...
If you had said Marcos Baghdatis, you would have been correct. He was on the list.
Well, that's not good to know, Joel.
And there was one final answer.
Did you get it? Would you have got it?
I would not have got it. One of my favourite players growing up, loved his attitude on court, loved his forehand.
Lloyd Harris?
One of the biggest forehands, I think, on the tour, as I say, when I was growing up. Fernando Gonzalez.
Wow, that is
Chilean.
A blast from the past.
Yes. Got to a Grand Slam final. I completely
That must be Australia as well then, yeah.
So Philippoussis, Safin, Roddick, Hewitt, Agassi, Baghdatis, Gonzalez, Nadal, Djokovic, Murray, Soderling, Del Potro and Marin Cilic. Those are your 13.
I'm quite pleased with that effort, I have to say, because I was not sure about quite a few people that I said then. But it's also, it feels like there haven't been many people who've made the finals, but to get to 13 feels like I would have thought there'd be more crossover.
Yeah, I just think it's because he was obviously he played in that era before, Djokovic and Nadal arrived on the scene. So there was quite a few solo names that came up. Yeah.
Wow.
But yes.
And that was Rafael Nadal, I've just looked it up, who beat Thomas Berdych in straight sets in the 2010 Wimbledon Championship. So,
well, there you go.
I did get that one very wrong.
Well, listeners, let us know how you did in Par for the Courts. Did you get 100%? I feel like there may be some Fed fans out there that did get full marks. So, let us know. But we're going to be moving on to the Tennis Weekly mailbag now. We had Simon on email get in touch with us, and this is what he had to say. Hey, guys, here's a question for you. Hubert Hurkacz recently announced on social media that he intends to play mixed doubles with Iga Swiatek at the Paris 2024 Olympics. What other pairings would you like to see step forward and play for their nation? What a great question.
That is a good question. Shall I kick us off?
Go on, kick us off with some pairings that you would love to see happen, but you're not sure if they're actually going to materialise.
I think that's very, very harsh because that's the whole of my list, if I'm honest. I've gone for Raducanu and Jack Draper, I just thought straight from the Vodafone booth in Wimbledon Q. I thought they could pop on over after they've made their appearance there for their sponsor. I've got Holger and Wozniacki, of course.
Oh, not Clara Tauson.
I think they've said that they're aiming for it. I mean, if I was asking who I would prefer to play doubles with, I probably would have gone for Clara Tauson because I think she might be a one-handed volley is probably slightly more preferable.
Yeah.
I mean, if you can't win a doubles title with Serena, you might not be the best doubles player in the world. Like in Auckland in her send-off WTA tournament. I've also gone for Osaka Nishikori. It is on clay though, so I'm a bit concerned at that prediction. And then I've gone for some delightful choices of Rajiv Ram and Coco Gauff going for a doubles.
I quite like that.
Pair.
That feels quite a.
I feel like that could be a gold medal.
Very good mixed doubles type team.
And what about a home team? I've gone for Garcia and Arthur Archer-Fils. I thought maybe, What about you though?
Bublik and Rybakina, I think would be
spicy. That's two very different players.
Very contrasting as well. Rybakina, very ice queen on the tennis court.
Good serves.
Bublik, the entertainer. So I think that could be quite a funny interesting
An
pairing.
underarm serve from Rybakina.
Tsitsipas and Sakari. Alcaraz. Well, I was thinking either Alcaraz and Badosa or Alcaraz and Muguruza.
Ooh, I like the Muguruza option if we're going for things that won't happen.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe that's probably it's probably be me and bit of wishful thinking. Yeah. And the other one I had was my American pairing was actually Jesse Pegula and Taylor Fritz.
Well, that could be handy.
Fun.
I did also think of Vondrousova and Lehechka because I feel like that could be a very good combination because we know that Vondrousova is pretty dangerous wherever she plays. But yeah, a great question. I think it's always surprising what happens because it really does become a rankings scramble between the doubles.
I can
and the
never make
singles.
sense of like the calculations and the formulas they use for the Olympics. And are they only allowed one pairing per nation? Oh, but there is some entries for wild cards and.
It gets difficult with when I think there's one. I think Vondrousova managed to play the Olympics last time because she used a provisional ranking, which meant that ranking took Mukova out.
Of
so
course.
it all gets.
Yes, I remember that.
It's a spicy one when it comes to making the team, let alone playing. And then she took home a silver medal and took out Osaka. So all to play for.
Yes, that was very good. Yeah, well, we'll have to see, but yeah, there's some really. I think the mixed doubles could be a real highlight. I think of the Olympics. Next year, there's a lot of interesting pairings that could come up. Moving on though, we do have a talking point, Chris. Very quick one before we talk Rogers Cup, and this is the news that the US Open is going to be using video review technology for the 2023 tournament. So this is going to be used to check double bounce situations. It could check hindrance situations. It could check touch situations at the net. It's been used before in events like the Next Gen Finals and the ATP Cup, but we don't necessarily see it that much, to be honest, on the tour and even at Grand Slams, despite seeing controversies like double bounces still, I feel like plague matches sometimes. So it's nice, I think, to hear that this is coming through to be used for all main draw matches on Arthur Ashe, Louis Armstrong, Grandstand, Court number 5 and Court 17. What are your initial impressions of this? Is this a good move? Is this a bad move? Are you for or against it?
I think I always say if you are able to provide 100% certainty or clarity, then let's just avoid all of these whether it's a misunderstanding or a wrong call, because we see human error so much on the tour this year especially. I don't think it's that difficult to get it right, and I think if you have the technology, why not use it? So for me, this is a very positive thing, and I think, I wish it was there in 2009 in the US Open for Serena Williams, because she did not hit a foot fault. She could have gone, I'd like that to be reviewed, because she has never hit a foot fault. She really doesn't do it, and that call was truly wild at the time, and I think she probably would have won that match against Clijsters and won the title. So it can have big effects, especially if you do then obviously say you're going to jam a tennis ball down the throat of the lines person. That also can get you kicked out, but it wouldn't have got to that, is what I'm saying. So for me, I always welcome when things like this come in, because it might not be as fun from a spectator perspective, but the nature is who's going to play the best tennis on the court, and this helps the best person win the match.
Yeah, I can't decide if it's going to just
suck the fun.
Drama, suck the fun, take the drama out of these matches and create less talking points, or actually,
the handshakes will be much nicer, Joel. You'll hate it. You're not here for the handshake.
No, I know, exactly. Will it though? Could it create a new type of drama? I'm interested to see how it plays out. I also like the idea. The US Open audience is very rowdy, and I would love to see them say chant VAR in the crowd, to get some sort of interaction maybe going. So I think there's dynamics there that could make it interesting, but I do think it brings a clinicalness that is missing from the tour at the moment, and we're seeing, I think, a few too many of these instances that are leading to, although they might not seem significant at the time, are leading to match results that have been turned on its head. So I'm glad it's coming in. I'm just a little bit maybe disappointed that it's only going to be on the kind of all the main courts, but I understand it's probably from a testing point of view, and who knows, maybe in the future we will get to a point where it can be rolled out on all the tennis courts potentially at a Grand Slam.
Yeah, I think that would be obviously the intention. I think it's currently the only additional courts are court 5 and court 17, so there's still a chance, if you're playing qualifiers, you might be able to say it wasn't hindrance before you get called on that. But no, I think, again, it's something where, as you say, like so often, some of these decisions by umpires can really change the way a match can go. So I think for that respect, although they each might seem quite insignificant, like whether the ball passes through the net or over the net, I think that might not be the main reason this is being introduced, but I do think the peace of mind side of things will really help players, and maybe we'll see players be more honest. If they know it's going to go to review, they'll just say, look, it was a double hit, or it was not up, or it was this, and maybe it will actually kind of allow a bit more self-governance. You won't have to go as much to the technology because they know that the answer will be on the screen if it needs to be. So that could also be a nice touch.
Yeah, and I still think it's going to be interesting in terms of understanding how it's going to be used, in the sense of is this a challenge?
At every point.
Is this, how many opportunities are going to be able to get to go to VAR? Is the umpire allowed to do it themselves, or do they have to wait for the player to call upon it? I still think there's a few things that need to be netted out, but I think it's exciting to see it being brought in. Let's move on to the Rogers Cup. We've got a few minutes just to talk very quickly, Chris, about the men's and women's draws. Now, I think this is a bit of a sort of funny tournament, in the sense of the defending champions are Pablo Carreño Busta and Simona Halep. I feel like the less said about that,
I'm going to have to change
the
my
better.
predictions. I had them both to defend the titles. Is that not going to happen?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think PCB's just been injured for a long time.
I keep looking for them on the draw list. I can't see them. Yeah,
it's. I mean, it's a little bit awkward. I mean, we do have the men's and women's draws. Let's very quickly look at the men's draws. We've got Carlos Alcaraz as the top seed. Daniil Medvedev is the second seed. We've also got Casper Ruud in there, Stefanos Tsitsipas making up the top 4. Where have your eyes been drawn to in this draw? There's no Novak Djokovic. He seems to just be...
I was going to say my eyes have been drawn to Novak Djokovic's beard.
And his beard. I was going to say he's just been focusing on growing a beard.
Yeah, exactly.
I think I saw him also dancing in a nightclub in the rain or something.
He's been on inflatables. He's definitely not in Toronto, we can confirm.
No. But yeah, where have your eyes drawn to in this draw?
I think that we could get a very interesting sort of Berrettini-Sinner clash. I think that both of them are starting to play some good tennis. I'd love to see Felix turn around this run of form he's had. So for me, a lot of what I'm looking at is kind of these unknowns to see whether someone can do, a bit of a Dominic Thiem and be inspired by the situation to raise their game and come through some of these matches. I may not be a fan of the man, but Zverev has been playing very well in Hamburg. And so, I say not very well. He picked up the title. I didn't think he played very well, but I'd like to see where his level is at.
I mean, he's got Griekspoor in the first round. I actually think I might have that on upset.
It's going to be a really tough one. Yeah. And then beyond that, I think Medvedev, seeing how he makes the transition to hard courts. But I do think it's such a shame when you don't get Novak Djokovic and Carlos Alcaraz in a draw. We have to wait for that rematch of the Wimbledon final.
Well, yeah, I think, for Djokovic, he's always kind of like, I want to play Cincinnati because the conditions are more akin to the US Open versus
it's better
the
to play
Rogers
one. I
Cup.
honestly think it is. It's a bit like the Madrid-Rome scenario from this year where you only need to peak once.
I am looking forward to, though, also Monfils versus Christopher Eubanks in the first round. I think that could be quite fun. Just generally, that second quarter to me is quite loaded. You've got Andy Murray, Lorenzo Sonigo in there as well. Echeverry, Korda. We know Korda's pretty handy on a hard court. So, I think that second quarter is particularly where I'm looking. Moving on to the women's draw, though, we do have all the familiar names in there. We've got Iga Swiatek as the top seed, Arina Sabalenka at the bottom of the draw as the second seed, Rybakina is your third seed, and Jessie Pegula is your fourth seed. Again, Chris, where are your eyes drawn in this draw?
It's got to be Caroline Wozniacki. I think we've all been seeing the clips of her hitting with Holger. I think it's looking pretty good. I think she's, she looks like she's in phenomenal shape. So I think it'll be interesting to see how her game style translates to the tour now. I think there's a lot to be said for kind of a counterpuncher and a sort of one of those players who really he makes you beat them, because I think a lot of players these days we see can beat themselves. So I think she's a fantastic competitor. I think she will get through her first round. But I do think that if she does face the Wimbledon champion Vondrousova in the second round, I think that would be a step too far at this stage. But very tempted to see that one. I also think that Katie Boulter, from a British interest,
came through qualifying. But there's also a very tasty Ostapenko Jennifer Brady clash, which is going to be this evening. And Bianca, wherever Bianca is, I'll watch. You know that. Well, I'm also excited by Elina Svitolina has also got a qualifier, and that qualifier is Danielle Collins.
That feels odd, doesn't it?
I know.
She went through qualifying.
It feels really weird, doesn't it? I think actually Danielle Collins faced Eugenie Bouchard in qualifying and came through. Grand Slam finalist versus Grand Slam finalist in a qualifying draw.
It's tough to get a wild card if you're a North American at the National Bank Open. Goodness, qualifying stacked.
So there's a lot to feast your eyes on. Before we leave, Chris, I'm going to put you on the spot. Who are going to be your champions in Toronto and Montreal? I want two names.
Oh, that's a tough one, isn't it? I'm going to go Alcaraz and Swiatek.
Oh, okay. You've just copied my answers. I've gone Alcaraz and Swiatek as well. It's hard not to go.
I also wrote brackets maybe Rude. So we could do that. We could do that. I'll say that one then. If you can have Alcaraz, I'll say Kaspar's going to do it.
Okay. Well, let's wait and see. But yeah, it's hard not to go with the top seeds. I feel like it's a bit of a diplomatic answer. But let's wait and see. I just hope the weather holds up across the week.
We have a result to talk about next week, Joel.
I know, right? I'm sort of thinking this is the advantage of 2-week Masters events, is that they've got more time to play with now than these week-long Masters events, because Cincinnati's just around the corner. So
does one of them have a roof?
Montreal definitely doesn't. I think Toronto does.
So maybe we send the WTA to Toronto.
Am I right in saying that?
That could be the answer.
Yeah, exactly. That's plan B. If they have a roof. Basically, get a roof, Canada. Canada, get a roof. Yes. Listeners, let's end on that. But listeners, I hope you've enjoyed our latest episode of the Tennis Weekly podcast. Remember to subscribe to us to stay up to date on all the action to come from the ATP and WTA tours. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all major podcasting platforms out there. And if you like what you're hearing, then make sure to leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify.
You can also follow us on social media or email the show. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube. @TennisWeeklyPod is the handle. You can email the show, tennisweeklypod@gmail.com, or check out our website, tennisweekly.co.uk.
And we will be back next Monday at Tennis Weekly HQ for our next tour catch-up. So I hope you can join us for that. But in the meantime, it's goodbye from Chris.
Goodbye.
And it's goodbye from me. We'll see you again soon.